So, Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, is the latest animated film from Dreamworks. And I wouldn't say that it's up there with their more notable stuff like Shrek and How to Train Your Dragon, which DreamWorks has been touting, like, hey, this is from like the same studio that made these films. And I don't think it helps either that within the within like the new DreamWorks opening animation, they basically showcase all the stuff that they've worked on before, including Bad Guys from last year. So to look at all this, everything that's come before with DreamWorks and their resume and their pedigree, to have all that and then look at like Ruby Gillman, it seems like a step down, even though yeah, not really. Like the thing is, when you look at a film like this, it looks like it's like it might have been from like a smaller studio, like an up and coming Illumination one, just because it has very simplified features, but it also has its own style, its own kind of like doodle aspect, and a very endearing nature to it, where even though it looks like a bit of a simplified world, like the heart and the key stuff that make that film work is all present within it. So it's weird to kind of like gauge it, because like you feel like it's not quite matching up to DreamWorks to their standards, but it's still actually a really good film. So the film concerns Ruby Gillman, voiced by Lana Condor, and she's a girl who's grown up in a family of essentially sea monsters, but she's not quite sure which kind. She's just been told that she's been different and that she needs to blend in with like the humans and not like go to the ocean, because then she'll discover who she really is, which, as it turns out, is a kraken. And that's not a major spoiler, because they talk about krakens very early here. So Ruby, she abides by the wishes of her mother, Agatha, voiced by Toni Collette. And it's not easy for her. She lives in like, her mom wants her to stay away from the ocean, but they live in a seaside town, and like all the major activities take place on water, so it's tough. Like, she's still dealing with all the same problems that every teenager deals with, like, the social pressures at school, finding a date for the prom, asking out your crush, fairly familiar stuff for like teenagers. And to the film's credit, like, I love the world that they establish here of this seaside town. Like, all the characters feel very well defined. Like, they have like their interesting little personalities and shapes and designs. I love. I know a lot of people will look at this and they kind of see like like the simple shapes of like kind of the like the bean mouth and the oblong shapes, and the stretchy arms, especially since she's part of like a race that does have like stretchy limbs where they can like bend them like noodle arms and stuff like that. I love the whole look of it. But then it becomes like a little it kind of loses a little bit of that flair once Ruby discovers that as a kraken, she can transform into a giant monster with lots of tentacles. And it's more cute, I think, than it is terrifying. Like, it's definitely leaning in that, leaning more like in the turning red area, where it's like, she looks like she's transformed into a monster, but it's actually pretty adorable the way that she looks even with all the tentacles and everything, and the way everyone tries to hype her up as a monster. It doesn't she doesn't look too different from the way that she usually does. She's actually kind of adorable in like the bigger form. So you kind of feel for her. Like, she wants to hide this monster side of herself, but she feels that she's not getting the whole story from mom. So, in order to figure out more about her lineage and her powers and how to master them and be comfortable with them, she goes underwater and she visits her estranged grandma, played by Jane Fonda. And I will say that the one thing I kind of like about this film is that, like, some of the voice actors actually doing a really good job trying to get into like character here, with like Lana Condor and Toni Collette, I think, just kind of melt into their roles here. But Jane Fonda, it's just Jane Fonda. It's like that's pretty much what you hire her for, and like she's all right, but she's still it just feels like like she's more or less playing herself here. More or less because she's meant to be like like the kind-hearted matriarch. She's like a typical grandma. Like, even though there's a lot behind her history, and she has a bit of frustration and bitterness with her daughter, and that her granddaughter doesn't know her heritage, it feels like there should be more there. But she's surprisingly lenient and kind of gentle. She's like, I know she'd come back. She's way too passive about trying to communicate that there's a war going on between mermaids. And one of those mermaids happens to befriend Ruby. Her name is Chelsea, and she's voiced by Anne Murphy. And like I kind of blame the marketing for this, because they want to like lay in thick to the fact that the mermaids are the villain in this film, which they are. But I feel like the best way to appreciate this film is that like years down the line, a lot of people are going to love it a lot more, just because they don't know about the mermaid marketing here. Because it's not so much that Chelsea is a mermaid as the twist, but more or less her history that she has with the Krakens. That does kind of become interesting. And within the context of the film, divorced from the marketing, it actually does make for a really good twist, and makes Ruby question, who she can trust when so little has been divulged to her about the entire world. Now, having described the film, the one thing that a lot of people are going to recognize, like, okay, this seems a lot like Turning Red. Like, it looks like it's a womanhood allegory, and it very much is. Like, at one point, they pretty much just like outright state, the Krakens in the family, the only ones who can transform big are the women. So it's specifically a problem that the women have within this culture, and the men do not. The men just kind of stay in like the standard human sea monkey type form. I'm trying to find the best way to describe it. Basically, like Krakens that could pass as humans, which they showcase what happens when you get older by Sam Richardson voicing this comic relief character of Brill, who's just kind of an eccentric but very simple and very squat type of Kraken. So yeah, you have like that womanhood aspect, but then you also have like, family issues of trust. And then you also have, accepting who you are, and also, learning to like bond together with family. There's so many themes here that like, I like the idea of having them all work at the same time, because then the film doesn't become very simplistic, but the film also wants to be very, very fast and very eccentric within like its very short runtime. So it feels like it wants to topple on a lot here. And the problem with that, with the speed of this film, is that it doesn't feel like there's a lot of moments to fully embrace and explore these themes. Like, it feels like, okay, here's our section for womanhood, and here's our section for social pressures, and here's one for being comfortable with yourself, here's one for panic attacks, here's one for family legacy, and here's one about the war going on underwater. And it's like, there's so much here, and it's like you wish that the film would just slow down a little bit, as it keeps like slinging out like the slapstick of its characters and the modern vernacular of trying to establish the teenage lingo here, that it feels like you can't appreciate it. It's like you want this. I really wanted this film to slow down just so that I could, it could explore some of the themes that it sets up here. And I feel like that's a little bit of an issue, mostly because when you get into like the third act, when they have like the big reveal with Chelsea, I feel like it's a bit, it like there's a little bit of like a mixed message there, because it feels like there's a whole don't judge a book by its cover and be honest with yourself. And then you have like the deal with the mermaids, where they're trying to steal this Triton to become the rulers of the ocean again, and it kind of like, no, it says like, yeah, do judge a book by its cover. We told you the mermaids were bad news, and hey, look at that, they're bad news. So I wasn't quite feeling the film on that level. And a lot of other aspects here, like they work okay, but they don't like become anything more than that. I think this is best personified by the casting of Sam Richardson as Brill, who is a uncle of Ruby, and Will Forte as like the crazy the crazy kind of like sea captain who's trying to seek out a Kraken and capture one. They pretty much play the roles you expect them to, much like Jane Fonda. They dig out like like the typical voice roles that you'd expect. So if you've seen anything with like Will Forte and Sam Richardson, the type of performances that they're going to deliver, and they're mostly just standard comedic backup. And there's a whole lot of other standard elements here, with establishing its world and establishing, like, the problems that a teenager would face, and building up the Krakens and the mermaids. That it's like it works, and like I was definitely like smiling a lot, but there was never a moment where it completely sucked me in. It always felt like it was in a rush to get to like the next thematic moment or the next key plot point, or the next just visually stunning moment. Which, to the film's credit, it does look nice. I did enjoy looking at all the aspects of this town and the various characters here. That being said, some of the characters do fall to the wayside. Like, you have Ruby has a father and a brother, and they're just kind of like standard background noise. Like the father's an entrepreneur, and he loves his wife. He loves his wife deeply, and he has like his own little ship in a bottle business, and it's cute, it's adorable, but we don't get much more than that. And then you have Ruby's eccentric little brother, who he just loves dodgeball, and that's kind of about it for his character, which is kind of sad, because like they're meant to kind of team up and help each other throughout the film, and they're still just kind of falling back on like the same things that they always do. Like, they're very much in like the back seat for this adventure. So I was a little bit torn, because like there was never like like for a film with lots of slapstick and comedy, there was never a moment where I got as big of a laugh as I did out of Turning Red. But I did really smile a lot. I did love like the plight of Ruby. I was just waiting for it to just like go like one extra mile to make me feel a little something more, and it just kind of, and it's not quite there. So like it's a good effort. I will say this, like if you really love Turning Red, I think this is like a good double feature to have with it if you want something along those same thematic lines. I also love how very, very, very like snappy the dialogue is. There was never a moment where it's like, okay, they're trying too hard to appeal to modern like tweens and Gen Z. It always felt like, at least from like the reaction of the other kids, like it always felt like it was talking more with them rather than down to them, and trying to say, hey, like, how do fine children. It never felt like it was trying to do that, but it never broke out of like that kind of like standard animation formula, which is kind of sad, because I really do like what the film was trying to do here, and it definitely gets an A for effort. I like what it's trying to say. I love its messages. I love the way that it's designed. It just needs that extra kick to make it work here. So yeah, as like a family matinee, I think it's a really good option, because I think it's good for family viewing. I watched it with a bunch of kids. Like, the kids really seem to love it too, and it's got some pretty good messages, and just it's visually appealing. It's definitely not going to be like a DreamWorks classic, at least the way that I'm looking at it. I know it's too soon to tell right now, and a decade down the line, there's probably going to be a bunch of kids who grew up with this film and say, Ruby Gillman really, really solidified my childhood. There's probably going to be some kids who grew up like that. So, but as it stands, as from the film that I saw, like it's a good but not great DreamWorks animated film, especially when you consider the other films that they've worked on in the past. It's a good step forward. I would like to see them do more films like this, but it needs like that extra punch that stuff like How to Train Your Dragon had, or even stuff like The Bad Guys. The Bad Guys had like a little bit of that extra kick to it to make it like its own thing, and the way that it stands here, like it's a good film for DreamWorks. If this were like from a smaller studio, I'd say this is a great film. But knowing that DreamWorks has such like a rich resume behind them, Ruby Gillman is just it's good, but it's not great.